So nowadays I like to have an idea of what I want to kind of achieve before going out. So like I think that has like my approach to photography has changed over the years. Earlier it was a lot more just purely going out just to see what happens and taking photographs of that, but now it's slightly more calculated. I think, okay, this is the type of image I want to shoot. Um, I look for inspiration before I go out. Like, I think like I look on, especially on Instagram. Like if I'm going on a trip to like a place I haven't been before, I'll look up that place on Instagram and see what other photographers are doing, what kind of things I can expect to see there, and kind of like formulate my like creative vision based on what I see. But I suppose with wildlife photography, you can't predict everything, so there has to be like some element of spontaneity and like you have to react to whatever's happening because there are no guarantees. So I really do look for light. I think I love working with like different types of light. It's like my favorite time to photograph is just after sunrise, like in the golden hour period, or just after sunset, like in the blue hour period, where you can still get some great pictures, but like the lighting isn't completely flat, and like boring, for lack of a better word. Um, So light is one of the most important things for me when I look for something like to compose an image. Uh, then I also look for like when I'm shooting wildlife, especially, I look for like the animal's positioning and like the head turn because I believe that you can always make the most powerful images if you can capture like the animal's eyes or the animal's face. Actually, the image that I submitted for the Deer Photographer of the Year is kind of different because the deer is facing away from me. But as a rule of thumb, I try to keep the animals facing towards me and capture the eyes of the animals. Or yeah, and then I look at how I want to compose the image. Do I want to keep it a center composition, follow the rule of thirds grid, or maybe try something like completely different? So that's kind of like what goes through my head. So I believe I'm still trying to find my style when it comes to photography, especially wildlife photography. So all of my images are processed to like varying degrees. Um, for most of my shots, I like to keep kind of the integrity of the scene and trying to like show the beauty of what I saw myself like with my own eyes through my image. So at most, I'll enhance the colors a little bit. Probably, generally always crop the image, but in terms of enhancing the image, probably just the colors to some extent, maybe the exposure if I underexposed it or overexposed it. But I like to keep kind of the the feel of the image when I shot it. Like I'm always looking for inspiration in like different styles of editing. So this year I've been really inspired by David Yarrow and his black and white stuff in wildlife. So so far the stuff I've shot, it's a lot of monochrome like edits. So I'm experimenting with that. And like a lot of my favorite wildlife photographers have their own unique styles and maybe they edit the image a lot more than I do. So that's something I am interested in and maybe trying that out in the future. Like Shaz Jung, I love his style, the environmental surrealism. I think like the crossover between wildlife and sports is like huge. In fact, because I photographed wildlife for so long, I think sports is actually not as intimidating for me because with wildlife, no matter how much animal behavior you know, how much about the what you're going to shoot, you know, there's always a sense of you don't know what's going to happen, like unpredictability. But and like with sports, that's much less. And I love playing sports, so I think it's just like another way of expressing my love for sports and stuff. This image was shot in Bharatpur National Park, Bharatpur Bird Sanctuary in Rajasthan, India. So this was shot in December last. 2 years ago, I think. And I went on a father and son trip to the park. So basically, it's quite a unique experience because uh, unlike other safaris, you don't go on jeeps or um, so in the bird sanctuary, you can either walk or you can go on cycle rickshaws. Um, so basically, there's somebody cycling and like there's a cart at the back. Um, so it was quite a unique experience. And in December in Bharatpur, um, it's so Bharatpur is a wetland. So in December there's a fog that covers the entire wetland, and like it's like a dense fog. So going into that trip, I really wanted to make an image that made use of like the fog, and in the morning, obviously winter, there's beautiful light. So obviously, if I could I wanted to capture those two things together, and I thought that would make a really compelling image. Um, so one day, as we were walking on one of the paths, um, a deer crossed the path. So he went into the bushes for a while, for a couple minutes, and we were waiting for him to come out. And then all of a sudden, there was like loud, frantic rustling, and he darted out into the water. And then, like, initially, I had zoomed in completely. Um, I like some of those images, but I don't think they're as powerful. But then once I like got my shots that I was like, okay, now I've captured this, and I could think about more of my composition for a moment. I realized I had like a really beautiful background, and I completely zoomed out, I think, to like about 200 mm. I was shooting with a 200 600 Sony lens. So I zoomed out completely and took a second, um, like composed the image, and then as the deer moved through the frame, I shot a couple of images, and in my opinion, the one I submitted came out the best. And one thing I like about it is the depth through the frame. Like when you look at it first, it's just the deer. You look in the background slightly, you see some birds, and then if you look even deeper, you'll see another deer in the background. And like that's one of my favorite images from not only the trip, but from probably my whole portfolio. The tiger is really has a really special place in my heart. It's one of my favorite animals, and yeah, I think that's probably my favorite subject to photograph. Also because of the effort that goes into like finding a tiger in the wild on a safari in India, the suspense you get from like looking for the tiger, and then when you finally see it, and then get a great photograph of it. I went on my first safari when I was 5, but I only saw my first tiger when I was like 8 or 9. So it took me 3 years to find my first tiger. So it's definitely not an easy task. For my photography to develop, I would like to continue improving on my technical aspects of photography. Because I think you can have like all the ideas in the world, but as if you can't execute them, that's the most important thing. So obviously, I want my technical aspects of photography to increase as I improve. Like, yeah, and I also want to be able to create more compelling photographs more consistently, and I want to be able to create photographs that can tell a story or like send a message. Um, I think that's something that I have yet to learn how to do, and I'm really looking forward to going on the journey and like developing my photographs in that sense. But what would I want to achieve with my photography? I think there are also many things I want to achieve with my photography. Firstly, a lot of people don't have the opportunities to like see the animals and visit the places that I get to visit. So first and foremost, I do want to like share that experience with them. Um, and also other people who do get to go on these trips, maybe they don't have as good of a camera and they can't see the animal in as much detail as I can. So I really want to share that with the world. But I also want to raise awareness about environmental issues like deforestation, loss of habitat, poaching, wildlife trafficking. Um, so when I was younger, I did an online sale of my photographs, and also participated in an exhibition. The proceeds of both were donated to different wildlife charities in India, the Corbett Foundation and the Urvi Ashok Piramal Foundation, respectively. Um, and so conservation is obviously one thing that I think is incredibly important, as I'm sure you would agree. But one thing I don't think that's spoken about as much is that whenever I speak to people about wildlife, the first thing I always hear is, "Oh, Africa has such amazing wildlife," or "Have you been to Africa?" And like, that's definitely true. Africa does have amazing wildlife. I've been to Kenya, I went to Lake Naivasha and the Masai Mara, and it was a phenomenal experience. But um, for some reason, India does not come up as often as Africa does. So I really, and in my, and they're not really, at least in India, by Indians. So I lived in India for 15 years. I recently moved to Singapore, but at least in India by Indians, Indian safaris are not looked at in the same light as African safaris. Um, and I think that Indian safaris are as exciting as African safaris because you get maybe in Africa you get to see more animals, but in India it's a completely different experience. You get to track the animals. Like you're listening for alarm calls. You're tracking with like the animal tracks, and that's just a completely different experience. And the suspense when you're looking for it, looking for the tiger, looking for the leopards, you might know it's 20 meters away from you, and you're waiting for it to come out. And then it's incredibly rewarding when you do finally see the tiger, leopard, whatever animal you're looking for. And I think that that's an experience that people do need to have. So I want to show people that yeah, India is as good as Africa in terms of like wildlife, in terms of like places you can stay. It's India is no like less than Africa, and I think everybody should experience that. So I really want to showcase the beauty and the rich and diverse wildlife India has to offer, and encourage more people to visit these national parks. Don't wait for like a big trip to use your camera. I think that was a mistake I have made in the past, waiting for maybe a trip to national park to use my camera. Whereas now I've realized that I should always be shooting. Maybe not always wildlife. Like now I started sports as well. But as long as I'm staying in touch with my camera, I can make sure I nail the shots on the trip when it really counts. And really, you get wildlife wherever you look. So I lived in Mumbai before this. Really, in Mumbai, 45 minutes away from wherever you live, you can actually find flamingos who come and migrate in the winter months. You can find other birds in the city. In Singapore, you can find otters, you can find monkeys, you can find loads of birds, and great photographic opportunities. Um, and if anything, it'll just help you stay in touch with your camera. And then, in addition to that, I think I improved the most in my photography when I was consuming the most photography content I could. So on my Instagram, if you open it, it'll just be wildlife, 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 maybe a couple of sports photographers. So that way I'm getting ideas on what I can do in the future. I'm like getting inspiration. I'm seeing what kind of work is like good work. Like I'm getting like great influences on my photography. So I can take aspects from different photographers who excel in their area and apply that to my own photography. And in addition, like I follow a lot of photographers on YouTube on YouTube, especially YouTube is great. Like they have a lot of editing tutorials, a lot of tutorials with different how you can photograph different technical things in photography, whether you want to try focus stacking, whatever it may be. There'll be a tutorial for it on YouTube. And then another thing is to engage with the photography community online or wherever you live. Something I do very often is reach out to photographers who I look up to and I believe are better photographers than me, so I can like learn from them. Like I've asked them things like um, you can reach out to them via Instagram DMs. I think that's the easiest way right now. But I've asked things like what lens should I use for a particular style or technique in photography? What should I expect when I'm going on a trip to a place I haven't visited earlier? But like I've seen their photographs from there. Where to rent photography gear in a place, because I think renting is one of the best ways you can like really get into photography. Um, Really, I got my own first DSLR slash mirrorless camera last year, even though I'd been doing photography for like 6 years. I was using a combination of a point and shoot and renting a camera. That way I knew what I wanted. So I think renting is great. Um, and I also asked them for general feedback on my work because obviously feedback is the best way to improve. Um, they have like vast amounts of experience, vast amounts of knowledge. So you can really learn a lot by engaging with others from the photography community in online or wherever you stay. Most photographers, no matter what level they're at, whether they shoot for Nat Geo or whether they're just like somebody who lives down the block from you, they'd be happy to help you. I've had like I've contacted some like really well-known photographers who I think make amazing images and ask them for feedback, ask them for some tips on like things that I needed help with, and they gave me some um, fantastic feedback and help that I used to create some of my some of my favorite images. Like I don't think I would have been able to do a lot of create a lot of the images that I have been able to create if I hadn't reached out to others and learned from others like that. I've been on two trips with my grandparents, two wildlife trips, and my grandfather, um, my nana, was one of the like strongest supporters of my photography. He was always like telling all his friends, "Oh, my grandson's a wildlife photographer, and he's a great photographer," showing them my images. Um, Sadly, he passed last year in December, so I think, yeah, this one's kind of for him.